Chloe is both, which I did not know was possible. I mean, I did, but
Yes.
yes. So thank you, Courtney, for giving me the heads up that we are live. So to start, my name is Maya Ward. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here with
Chloe Holachenko. I also use she, her pronouns, and I am a policy and programs assistant at RIN.
And I am the Communications and Development Associate at RIN. For those who don't know, RIN is a South Carolina-based network with a mission to build a movement to advance the health, economic well-being, and rights of South Carolina's women, girls, and their families. And so what we're going to do really quick is we're going to have a quick chat about something that you probably have seen all over our social, if you follow us or through an email, is S1, the 6-week abortion ban, and what's going on with that. And the goal of this conversation is to keep it light and keep it pretty frank and honest, because a lot of stuff can be buried in like levels of policy and like different language. It's kind of inaccessible. So as of now, S1 did pass the South Carolina legislature and was signed into law by the governor. And then even before the governor signed it into law, Planned Parenthood and the Center for Reproductive Rights and Melissa Burnett Schutt McDaniel, the law firm, on behalf of the clinics in South Carolina, filed a lawsuit against the bill. And that lawsuit took effect on Friday, in which a federal judge, placed an order that blocked S1 from taking place. So technically, yes, S1 did get signed into law, but pretty much immediately it was blocked. So as of now, with the current state of South Carolina, or the state of South Carolina, abortion is legal up to the old parameters that are still in place. So that's something you have to check out with your healthcare provider and all that. But yes, it did become law, but it is not in effect because of that order. So it can be really confusing when we talked the whole process, because it was a really short time, because this thing flew through the legislature. But we were like, it passed the House, it passed the subcommittee, it passed that. And so everyone kept asking, oh, is it law? Is it law? Is it law? And it takes a couple steps before something actually gets to the point where it gets signed by the governor. So Chloe's going to give a really fast run through of how that actually happens, just to clarify some things.
Yeah, so what, Maya said that people, including my mom and my, sisters and my best friend, she said, okay, so now is it law? And I'm like, no, it still has some ways to go. And, is it now law? And I'm like, no. And then is it now law? Yes, but not now because of the ruling. And so what happens, and I didn't understand this process probably until I was introduced to RIN my freshman year in college, which was only 3 years ago. And I was like, oh yeah, I know, state politics. I know how a bill moves through, the state legislature, but it is so complicated. And still sometimes I'm like, okay, wait, no, okay, yes, that's the correct process. And so what happens is that a bill is introduced by the senator or representative, and then whoever it's introduced by, it'll start in that chamber. And so S1, the first piece of legislation that was filed for this 2-year term, this was their number one priority. Like literally number one out of thousands and thousands and thousands of bills. This was the first. And so it'll start there. And there it's assigned to a committee, and it is signed by the speaker that is voted mainly by the majority. And so the speaker sends it to a committee, and that subcommittee, it has to go to subcommittee first, and then the larger group committees are normally broken down into subsections. And so that subcommittee, the chairman or chairwoman has to want to bring it up. Chairperson has to bring it up. And so when they bring it up, they'll vote on it. And if they have to amend it, then they'll vote on amending it. If it doesn't pass favorably, it'll stay stuck in the subcommittee section. And so if it passes favorably, it goes on to the next larger committee. And then if it's amended, it'll go back down, or it'll be voted through favorably. And then it goes to that chamber. So in this instance, it went to the Senate. And in the Senate, they have several different votes that are preliminary. They have different debates and they have different readings of it. And this is when, you see the clips on the news about different legislators going back and forth about the bill. And then afterwards, after it passes favorably, it'll go back to the House. And it's the exact same process in the House. And sometimes it has to go from the House to the Senate again because an amendment in the House passes, or it'll go through the House and it'll pass. In this instance, the S1 did that, and then it immediately, or sometimes not, sometimes it's delayed, goes to the governor's office, or the governor doesn't have to choose to sign it. So in this instance, the governor signed it almost instantly, and instantly it was stopped by the judicial system. And so now that is where we are at right now. So it's in our judicial system, and sometimes it goes slow, sometimes it goes fast, and right now we are waiting.
Mm-hmm. And that's it's an interesting process because it's so many different levels, and it has to be passed here and here and here and here. And usually that takes years. Usually, you can introduce a bill and it won't actually happen until 3 years down the line. Like, it'll be introduced in multiple legislative cycles. But this one, I mean, I don't know, probably broke a record, just flew straight through because there was motivation behind it. But we put up a fight, and we're going to talk about that fight in a second. Let me look really quickly. So Chloe mentioned there's a spot in each legislative body, the House and the Senate, called the subcommittee. And at the subcommittee is where the general populace is allowed to offer testimony on that bill in favor of it, in opposition of it, just sort of their comments and their expertise. And so we made 2 giant pushes to get our network members to provide testimony, because we think if you're going to make a bill about us, we have the right to say something about it. And they tried to make it more accessible to people. So they gave virtual options and in-person options, but understand that the legislative process happens during the day, Tuesday through Thursday. It is not easy for people to take time out of their schedule to come to testify or to come listen in on committee hearings, because I'm working. The reason I was able to do it is because I work at an organization that allows me to do this. Like, for the first one, I think I was on for 7 hours waiting to testify, like 7 hours starting at 10 a.m. throughout the day. And the reason I was able to do that is because I work for an organization that is actually focused on that. Imagine all the people who wanted to say something but weren't able to because they weren't able to testify, or they weren't able to show up. So I appreciate that they did try and make it easier by allowing the virtual option, but understanding that it can be hard to make sure you actually have the chance to say something. And I actually was so nervous because I'd never done that before. I mean, I'm 24. I didn't think I'd ever be testifying in front of a legislative body, and yet I did it because this is something that matters to me. And so I signed up. I sent in an email. I got the Google Teams link, or the Microsoft Teams link, and I joined and sat on there for hours until I heard my name called. And then I gave my testimony, and it's something I had written and I had practiced, and I had read it to friends and family members to make sure like it sounded okay. I was so nervous. After I hung up, I had to type something and I was just shaking. It was just like, it was because it was the very first time, but it was a lot easier than I thought. I was worried I was going to get questions. I was worried that someone was going to say something, but people are pretty respectful in that. And so I wasn't really nervous about that. And then the second time I did it, I pretty much rehashed the same thing I'd already said. But at that point I was like, oh, I'm on. Okay. And I just read it and then hung up because I had already done it the one time. So I think it's the dipping your feet in, which is just kind of absolutely nerve wracking. But then when you actually do it, you're like, they're just listening to me.
Yeah.
I'm just making my opinion known.
Mm-hmm. And especially like all of the different types of testimony that they accepted this cycle, in the ongoing pandemic that we're currently in. They allowed people to type it in and send it to the Senate staff person, and they also allowed people to record it and send it in to that same staff person, or to video chat through, which is how you testified. And that was a little bit more complicated, obviously, but if they're willing to make it safe enough, then why not utilize it? And then the next is actually going into the legislature, which once again is very hard to access, especially if you're spread all across South Carolina, and if you're in Greenville and you don't want to make this huge trip, or if you don't have a car. But also people are at work, people are in school. I couldn't testify because I was in class, and so they don't make it easy for the public to speak on these bills and issues that matter to them.
And not to mention COVID. I don't want to catch that again. Not fun. And so I'm not going to go to anything in person that I don't have to do. I will say it seems as if from the first testimony to the second, and then even through watching other other hearings for other legislative priorities, it does seem as if they are trying to make the online process easier. They've started doing like a this person and then this person, so you don't miss your name being called. So hopefully some of these kinks will get worked out as the legislative cycle continues. Aside from testifying, which we had over 100 people testify, and I don't just mean written testimony, like in person or online testimony, which is
that doesn't even include all of the testifiers that sent in testimony, through email. Doesn't include, all of the people that called their legislators, all of the people that sent emails, sent letters, reached out on social media. And I know that you have some numbers to go into, some numerical, easy to measure things of how people reached out.
Yeah, I mean, during both hearings, the chairperson held up a stack, and I mean a stack of the printed out tests, which, save the trees, come on, y'all. But a stack of the printed out testimony that they had gotten in email. I mean, it was just a thunk. So clearly people are motivated and clearly people are thinking. I mean, we had over 6,700 people across the state of South Carolina email their legislators or text or tweet their legislators or call them and say, hey, I'm not in favor of this bill. And that's across all stages of it, but a big old no. Because we're trying to make it easy. We provide links. All you gotta do is click on it. It has their email pre-written. You can edit it however you'd like, or you can send it like that. There's a call script, because I remember the very first time I ever called a legislator and they asked me questions and I was like, oh, what? But that 6,700 people, that ended up being over 23,000 touches to legislators, either emails, calls, or tweets.
Yeah. So that, it's just wild, the amount of people that came to say, we do not like this. This is not going to be good for South Carolina. And even then, legislators chose not to listen to South Carolinians and people in South Carolina, whether they're going to university or, they have family members here, that this bill is not good for the state. And, while some legislators recognize that, they still voted the way they've, voted, and some it actually changed. I know that when we had the honk, when everyone
the car caravan.
Car caravan. Excuse me. It's been a day. The car caravans, when people were driving around the state house with signs and fun stuff on their car and different writing, and people were honking. People inside the legislature and people, even students, were like, "Oh, was that you? Like, were you over there honking your horn to say stop voting? Don't vote for S1?" And I'm like, wow, like people actually paid attention to it.
I mean, one of the things is that we are trying to do advocacy, and we is just a movement, not just Ren, but the entire movement of people who are fighting for reproductive freedom in South Carolina and across the Southeast in reality. Want to do things on the ground, want to do things in person, but we're very cognizant of the fact that COVID's happening. And so watching those car caravans take place and just hearing honking, we could hear it from Ren's offices, which are right across the street. So I'm sure all of those people in those buildings were fully aware of that happening. We had people online doing the one-person protests, holding up signs, tagging their legislators, so they knew that there are people in the ruralest of rural counties that you don't think are going to have people being able to actually come in and do action because it's hard to get from place to place. We're able to do something online, which is incredible. And then the giant, I hope everyone saw the giant abortion artwork and mobile petition. Oh my goodness.
Honestly one of my favorites. I'm pretty sure I just changed it to my cover photo.
You did.
Because it made me so proud that I was standing alongside and in the fight with so many advocates and survivors and people across South Carolina and across my community that were here for it, and we're not going to take this kind of injustice.
And we gave people the opportunity, if they wanted to walk up and they were in town, to write their name on it, because it's a mobile petition basically, but gave people the opportunity online to add their name. So we had over 100 people do that online, just say, hey, add my name. We had DMs, we had comments, we had shares. We had people saying, hey, add me and my mom, my dad, my sister, my uncle, et cetera, to this list, which is just people you don't expect to be reaching out to you. So that's absolutely amazing. But
and you can't.
Oh,
you can't forget the circling at the state house where
yes.
people with massive signs circled at the state house, and that was a socially distant protest where the legislators actually walked out of the house and
That was
walked out of the
wild.
hearing and was able to speak and able to see the group of people that they were representing, and they were showing the house that this is not something that is bipartisan. This is something that is so like you can't stand for it.
Mm-hmm. I remember that moment when we were standing on the State House steps and like we have people, because we allow people this chance to speak and share their mind, and we had someone reading something and all of a sudden I hear murmurs and something, and I turn around and they're just, the doors have opened and there are legislators just walking down towards us from inside the State House to come and join our movement.
Yeah.
Because they had walked out that day. They had said, this is enough. We aren't even standing here to support this. And they came and joined us, which was so cool. So very cool.
Absolutely.
But what, like, Chloe, you call yourself a Ren fangirl, which I think is a very apt description. You're a Ren super fan.
Oh, absolutely.
For years and years and years. And so you're like a little bit more on the ground, I think, than I am. So what have you heard? Because I've, heard online people rah, 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 but from your perspective.
Well, I would say that obviously, because I am a student at the University of South Carolina, I am the youngest person in the office and I am part-time. It does give me a different kind of, on the ground kind of grassroots organizing. And so I was reaching out to students, I was reaching out to other student orgs or other, City of Columbia clubs that I'm a part of, or other, different activists that I know from Charleston, from my hometown, and telling my sisters to reach out to their friends and, to reach out to, their networks, and my mom, to, reach out to your network, tell your coworkers, and my dad was talking to his friends and his coworkers on, carpenter jobs to really try to, to tell people what the legislators were trying to do. And I have to say that students were, to me, it wasn't disheartening, but like, the students are sometimes a lot very, very pessimistic and I'm more optimistic. And so, just telling them that, okay, yes, sure, this is probably going to pass, but just the sheer number of things that intimidates people, that intimidates lawmakers, to know all of the people that are against this, like in the back of their minds, there is that doubt. Like, oh, like maybe we can't get this done because they've tried before and they've failed before. And currently they've failed because this bill is not accurate. And so I think it was just really important to not only, share share people's testimonies and, say, you can listen to testifiers, you can listen to survivors share their stories. You can listen to, men saying, even though I can't have a baby, this bill should not be passed because it's not fair to be sitting up in front of a bunch of men passing this. And so I think that, I got down and I got, emotional and I was sad and I, people reached out to me and they were just distraught. And I told them that, I was in the same place. I was sad, I was down, I was, emotional because I'm at, the quote unquote baby making stage of life. And I'm about to start my career and I'm, I want to be a mom, but I want to be able to be a mom when I want to be, when I can economically decide that I can, start that chapter of my life and when I can afford it. And under the circumstances of mine, I want to be in control of that. I don't want anything to be pushed on me. And so, hearing the survivors and all of the testifiers that were against this bill really inspired me and made me proud and reminded me why I am a part of this fight, but also, why I love Ren so much because here we are talking about S1, but there are so many other bills that we are pushing and supporting at the State House. And then there's other ones where we are, still defending against.
Yeah. And one thing I noticed during all of this is every so often there'd be the sense of like disappointment and like, what's going to pass? It's like, what's the point? The point is that we have to make sure they know. Like there's sheer number of people who run for office in the state on purely pro-life platforms. Like the idea that this is like my one and only thing. Well, yeah, it's great. You did it. Now what are you going to do? Pass COVID relief? Are you going to actually like help our education system? Are you going to actually do something that's going to benefit our state? Because that'd be great. That'd be nice if you actually focused on something that's going to help people. But the thing that gave me the most hope is seeing the sheer number of people who took action, the sheer number of people who went to caravans and did all those kinds of things. And I need to give a quick shout out to some of our coworkers, Melissa Moore and Kayla Millette, for the incredible organizing that they did. I mean, overnight, they've got 50 people coming to do a car run. Overnight, they've got like banners made and new contacts. And because the reason that this is happening is because there is this momentum. This movement's not going to go away. It's not going to die down. The anger about this, I mean, it's not law. I mean, it's a law technically, but it's not in place because we all knew it was unconstitutional. They just did it because that's what they get elected by doing. And so, and because, politics and whatnot, but it's not law. Like, let's split there. It's law, but it's not in place because let's be clear, this is not constitutional. And so even if they're going to continue pushing more things, they're going to continue pushing bans and they're going to continue doing this and that, this movement is not going away. There are still thousands of people across our state who are going to continue standing up and saying, hey, I don't like this. You already tried it. Why are you still trying it? Why aren't you focusing on things that actually matter? Like all of the people who were facing eviction or who are facing unemployment because of, a global unprecedented pandemic that they decided to make this a bigger priority than.
Yeah, exactly. And, yip-de-doo, the governor signed it. And now South Carolinians' taxpayer dollars will be spent and will be, if you want to, say wasted on litigating and fighting this bill in the courts, where other bills very similar, copycat bills very similar to this, just like our friends in Mississippi have one, are waiting to be heard and decided by the Supreme Court, who have not decided whether or not. And so, this is just one that goes into a collection of bills that are waiting to be heard.
And we knew this. We knew this was the strategy because we had legislators say it on the floor, say, hey, this isn't going to pass. Why are you doing it? Because we want it to be litigated. We want it to, let's focus on things that actually are important to us. But I want to hit really quickly on the specifics of some of this part of this bill, because this bill is wild, y'all. Like,
if I could go on and on and on about the specifics. I think the number one thing that really gets my goat, as if you could say, is the rape and incest and fetal anomaly exception.
Yeah. Because it's not an exception.
No.
There's the addition of rape and incest exceptions, which are big buzzwords all over, and whenever you try and ban, it's like, oh, does it have that? Does it have that? It doesn't matter. It's not going to make the bill any better. All you're doing, adding rape and incest exception, is yay, people who have been traumatized maybe get some relief. No, they don't, because even the way this bill is written, if you are a survivor of rape or incest and you get an abortion for that reason, the doctor who performs that abortion procedure is required to provide your name and contact information to the police. So either you have to report this or you don't get to receive healthcare services. That's not helping anyone. That's just further traumatizing people. And so the only reason they add in rape and incest exemptions is so that the people who are passing these bills get to say, well, at least I helped someone. At least I helped this person. It's not actually helping anyone. It's just to help bring people who are a little bit more on the fence about these kinds of things, to make them feel good that at least they didn't make everyone's life miserable.
Yeah, and these exceptions are not for these survivors. They are to make legislators feel good. A lot of times, obviously, because the stats are there, survivors of rape or incest, they don't go to the police, obviously, because of stigma and different kinds of things. And, sometimes, most oftentimes, law enforcement is not equipped to, handle these very traumatic experiences. So, what are the chances of them are going to the police and receiving this abortion or other healthcare is very, very low. And, my mom was like, well, why would they do that? And I'm like, that's exactly the point. They don't want people to access healthcare that is fundamental to being a human in America. And, people who are survivors of incest, why aren't we focusing on them, of their abuser getting out of the house? Or why are we not, reprimanding the abuser that, committed, these crimes against people?
Yeah. The only reason they are in there whatsoever is to make certain people feel good about themselves and make them feel less extreme when they basically what they do is they pass a near total ban on allowing people who can get pregnant to access healthcare that they rightfully deserve. And we had experts from the the domestic violence, sexual assault space come in and testify that this bill's no good. We had survivors come and say that this would not help them at all. We had everyone come out to testify, come out to hearings, come out and to protest, and they said this is not going to help. They've heard it, they know. And then the other thing is that so the way this law works is it doesn't punish the person receiving the abortion; it punishes the healthcare provider. So the healthcare provider, if they perform an abortion that's in violation of this statute, they are faced with either or, so prison time and or a $10,000 fine. So they could get both. They could pay a fine and that. And then if you think about it, you get prison as a healthcare provider, you lose your license, you can't practice medicine, so you're officially not a doctor. So doctors aren't going to be doing this, aren't going to be able to perform healthcare because they might not be able to be doctors anymore, which is absolutely wild if you think about it, and it's not going to help anybody.
No, and it makes it risky to be a doctor in South Carolina. And so, everyone that's going to, USC School of Medicine or MUSC down in Charleston, it is going to drive people who are talented, people that want to save lives and want to help South Carolinians. It's going to drive them away,
It's just, who's going to practice in a state where you could go to jail for doing your job? No one.
Yeah, no.
We already don't have enough OBGYNs in our state.
It's hard for me to find a gynecologist that I trust and that I know is looking out for me. And, obviously I want somebody that, believes in science and that shares the same beliefs and is looking out for me. And, you want qualified gynecologists and doctors and OBGYNs, especially in a state.
Letters.
I know, so many letters, so many different things, especially in a state where maternal health and infant mortality, the rates are shocking, and especially Black maternal health. There's a bill right now that, different implicit bias training, and there's a bill to address that. But then we want to make it harder for, qualified doctors to be good doctors here. And so for me, that's just it's very frustrating as somebody who, I didn't always have healthcare. And so, I want somebody, because I can have one, that can be confident in their job. But also, if you're 6 weeks or under, with carrying your term, it's going to be insanely hard to find an abortion provider or a physician that is willing to perform, different kinds of that form of healthcare, because it is so risky, and they could go to jail and they could lose their license. And so it just makes it tough, and it puts the people in white coats in difficult positions, which is.
It's not even. Oh, sorry.
No, you're good.
And we had over 500 medical professionals from across the state sign on to a letter that's saying that not only would this bill make it harder for them to do their jobs and will drive medical professionals out of our state, but also it makes it harder for medical schools, because we have three medical schools, to actually operate, because there are certain things like learning how to perform abortion procedures and things that you have to do to get your licensure for certain specialties. I'm not terribly familiar with the medical field. That's my sister. That's not me. But they won't be able to do that with this law, which means they can't actually get their degrees in the state, so they're going to go somewhere else. So we're going to lose qualified, not even just qualified doctors, but also qualified candidates for medical school and for medical licenses. It's not going to help.
And, residents in South Carolina that could be contributing, wealthy people who are doctors to contribute back into the economy. And another one of the things that I enjoyed were all of the pro-lifers, all of the, anti-choicers, excuse me, all of the people that, came and said, I was on the fence about having an abortion and I decided not to, and I love my baby, I love my baby. You made our point for us. That was your choice. That was your choice. You had the power to do that. You had the power to do that. And which is the whole point of not passing this bill, is to have that person in control and not force them to carry out their pregnancy to term, not, to not pass this forced pregnancy law.
Mhm. Because I mean, talking about like this bill itself from our perspective, like you're what, 23, 22?
22.
22.
22.
I'm 24. Like, we have a long time that we could get pregnant and have children. Like, that's a long period of time. And it's like, do I want to stay in a state where I would be pretty much forced to, if I were to get pregnant unexpectedly, do I want to stay in a state where I'm forced to do that? Because that does impact my choices of where I go to get a job, is if I have access to these services.
No,
Like,
100%. 100%. And even, it doesn't just qualify to young people, but
mm-mm.
wild things that, science does not always predict happening. My mom, who is 53, could accidentally get pregnant, if something happens. And,
Mhm.
would she be forced to carry that pregnancy to term if it was not in her best interest, or if it was not in the baby's best interest? And especially this bill really continues to marginalize poor people of color
Mhm.
because they don't have the services to jump on a plane and go to a place where they can receive this certain health care.
I mean, you think about taking time off work, you think about the money that it costs to even have the procedure, you think about the transportation to
Childcare,
childcare, transportation to get somewhere,
time
like
off,
time.
all of the mental health services.
All of these things are just further, so even making this even more difficult for someone. Because I mean, I recognize my own privilege. I'm fortunate enough that if I were to be faced with unplanned pregnancy that I wanted to terminate, I could get on a plane, I could go somewhere. I have that option. Most people don't. And so whenever I advocate for myself, I have to understand that, like, even though this bill is going to impact me directly, it's going to impact so many other people. And so I can't just speak from my own position. I have to recognize and keep the floor open for all the other people who would also be impacted in a different way than I would.
Exactly. And this piece of legislation could also increase, unsafe abortions,
Oh,
botched abortions.
without a
We
doubt, that's going to happen.
we could be reversed and go back into time,
Mm-hmm.
with the coat hangers. And even that affects, pregnancy and maternal health later down the road. If you do decide, when it is your choice to get pregnant, it can affect the health of the baby and the health of you during,
Mm-hmm.
childbirth, or you carrying to term. And so I just think that it's really important to think about all of the different effects of this, but also remember that South Carolina poverty levels are very high. The amount of children in foster care are very,
Mm-hmm.
very high. The amount of children that only eat at school are very, very high. The homeless, like, all of these rates that prove that, like, mandatory pregnancy laws are not good, because it's hard. It's hard making ends meet for one person. Like, I can't imagine if I were, to have another one,
Mm-hmm.
a baby. That's super expensive. And so I think that, it's important to just think of all of the different aspects that this bill touches.
And one thing that's incredibly infuriating is that this is S1. S1, the very first thing. It was filed before the legislative session ever started. We got, as an organization, we got the notification that it was having a hearing before, but like, people had to sign up to testify about this before the legislative session even started.
Mhm.
Just keep that in mind. Before the starting thing happened, for anything, we already had to start mobilizing, because apparently that's more important than figuring out our messed up vaccine system, anything like that. And so, one thing I guess to be grateful for, which I'm saying grateful very sarcastically, is that at least this is done. It's law, but it's not actually law because it's not in effect.
Yes, yes,
And now we can actually focus on things that matter. Like,
yes.
Chloe, you want to give a couple examples?
Yes, I want to give a couple of examples of things that I am so pumped about. I am equally as pumped about as I am towards my disdain towards S1. It
Okay,
is
let's go.
the paid leave for state employees. It is
Okay.
the pay equity bill that would grant pay equity and is the most transparent, best pay equity bill out there, and is my favorite bill. And then we also have other partner bills that we're supporting, and we also have the prescription access bill that would allow pharmacists to give prescription birth control at pharmacies, and we have the I know it's the Black maternal health bill. I'm South
Mhm.
Carolina pregnancy.
Oh, dignity in pregnancy and childbirth.
Yes, South Carolina Dignity in Pregnancy and Childbirth Act. And we have these bills that are equally as exciting and equally as helpful, and we need to put as much motivation and as much push and determination and effort and energy and enthusiasm behind these bills as we did S1.
Because that's the thing, is like, people are so quick to, and we love our network. Let's just put that out there. Y'all inspire us every single freaking day to do our job, to get up, to keep in touch with, like, to actually do things. And we want y'all to put as much energy and effort as you did fighting S1 into promoting some of these bills, because I mean, 6,700 people against S1 is a record. I mean, in all of our time as at Ren, record. I mean, immediately, at one point we had more people take action on S1 in one day than we had on certain bills in 2 months.
Their entirety,
because
yeah.
people are motivated. We need y'all to bring that same energy to paid leave, to sick leave, to Black maternal health, all of these things, because if we're trying to defend our state from getting worse, but let's actually make it better.
Yeah, no, let's focus on these things that are not going to, affect people that just want to get an abortion. Let's go after these things that are going to affect, state employees. And if we do that, then we can bring it out to, the general public. And South Carolina can be a leader and a motivator in paid leave policy. We can push other states to do the same. And we can push other, states across the country that may be more red than South Carolina to do the same. We can, force pay equity, which would, require encourage. But, if it were to become law, we can, have this law be the law of the land and affect everyone, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender. Everyone, can be paid equal. Imagine what that can do.
I'm going to go somewhere where I know I'm going to be paid well.
Exactly. And I want that to be in South Carolina.
Exactly. We need South Carolina to keep us here.
Yes. Yeah. Like South Carolina is my home. South Carolina is where I grew up. It's where my family is. It's where I found myself. I want to be able to stay here, and I want to be able to say that, they want me to stay here. The government and legislators want me to be here because they see me and they want me to,
they care about me.
Exactly.
And whenever someone's like, oh, well, this is just for this population, this for that. Well, paid leave for state employees, take that as an example. If we can get that one, you don't realize how many people are state employees. It's a lot of people. That bill would impact so many people. But also too, right? If someone has a chance between working with a public company or a privately owned company and not having time off for their child, or they could work at a state agency and have the time off for their child, maybe it would encourage those private companies to actually follow along and do that, because it'll help them get employees, help them maintain their workforce, which is everything they want, because it costs too much money to keep rehiring people.
Yeah,
that's just a waste.
And I know that you and I could go on and on and on.
We probably hang up soon.
Yes. I'm sure that we could go on and on and on. And, if you stayed here through Maya and I's, rambling and babbling about this, and you appreciated it, make sure you go follow Ren on social media. But also remember that if you have any questions, do not be hesitant on reaching out to any of, Ren staff or Ren on social media or anyone about your questions and about, your concerns or your worries, because that's what we are here for. We are here to help others, increase their advocacy actions. And so stay tuned. Ren is always doing fun things, and we do a great job of, posting and highlighting our partners and different bills and all of the likes. So make sure that you're out there.
And if you want to learn more, it's scwren.org. That's our website. It's got a lot of stuff posted on it already, but we continue to update it every single day. And I mean every single day, with new things that are coming down the pipeline that we see. And you follow us, obviously, on social. But just don't forget, I mean, if you have questions, DM us or reach out to us. Our email is info@scwren.org. You email that, you get me. And I'll try my hardest to make sure we get ASAP responses to all of y'all, because we want to make sure you have all the information you need to be advocates or just to live in the state.
Exactly. And everyone just stay healthy, be safe.
Yes, wear a mask.
and have fun.
Right.
Bye.
Chloe.
Thanks, Maya.